So we'll get started. I'll let people in if anyone else comes along. As usual, I'll say as little as possible through the call, but if we can just go around and introduce ourselves really quickly, and then we can let Bhavik get on with the slides. So I'm Sarah from Shortlist, specialise in RPA recruitment. And we've been running these for about 3 months now, so going well. We've got a couple of new faces, so we'll bring them in a minute. But Bhavik, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Bhavik. I'm the Intelligent Automation Lead at Quantumate. I think I've spoken to probably many of you over the last few weeks. So my duties are really to head the Intelligent Automation division here, focusing mainly on support maintenance and managed services, but we also do consulting and implementation as well.
Thank you. Gavin?
Hi, I'm Gavin Price, Automation Outcomes. I've been an RPA developer for 6 years, specialising in UiPath and Blue Prism, and I've been a developer in SQL for 20 years before that.
Thanks. And Mark?
I'm Mark Barrett, also of Automation Outcomes. I focus on the business analysis and strategy and engagement with organisations. And yeah, similar to Gavin, I've been, well, not quite as long. I've been in automation, RPA automation for about 3 years, but we've been working in automation of different guises for over 10 years now.
Thank you. And Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Wyman. I'm the lead for automation in the Dorset Integrated Care System and the NHS, and yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I'm just having to deal with 3 or 4 trusts and acute hospitals at the same time, trying to herd them like cats in the right direction. So yes, that's what I do.
A couple of new faces. We've got Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hi. Hi, I'm Adam Nickerson. I work for NHS Shared Business Services. So we operate procurement solutions for the NHS and the wider public sector. And we have 10 digital and IT framework agreements. So I lead up the team that operate those. And the reason I'm here and interested, I suppose, is we're considering developing an RPA type framework to offer a route to market for suppliers and for customers to purchase solutions.
Well done.
Carolyn, you work together, don't you?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Caroline Lawton. Yeah, I work for Adam at NHS Shared Business Services. Yeah, just exactly what Adam said, I won't repeat. So yeah, thanks for inviting us to join, and thanks to Paul for introducing us to the group.
Welcome.
And Christian, hello.
Hi, I'm Christian. I am a business analyst and automation developer. I've been working in financial services for a few years now, but now on a bit of a COVID break.
Thanks for that. Christopher, hi.
Oh, I'm Chris. I'm an RPA developer for the University of Manchester.
I think Christine, have you just joined?
I have, yeah. Hi, you okay?
Yeah, good to have you here.
Yeah, sorry, last meeting overran a little bit.
It's all right. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly and then we can move on?
My name's Chris. I'm from a company called Veristar, and my current role is Head of IT Ops.
Thank you very much. So, Bhavik, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, other support maintenance. Sometimes people call it a boring topic. Development's more fun, and support maintenance it's not as exciting, but it plays a kind of vital role, especially for any automation. So I think in this session, we're kind of cover why support maintenance is important, the different types of services that you should think about incorporating within the business, as well as when you should be engaging the support team throughout your process. So, whether it's a process discovery or when you're building a business case, and the types of roles, responsibilities, and the high-level structure. And one of the kind of key points I want to highlight here, I know everyone in the industry kind of mentions that 30 to 50% of the initial projects kind of fail. And I think one of the reasons here is because there isn't a support maintenance plan in place. And I think throughout this presentation, please feel free to pitch in, and if you have any questions or if you have different views, I'm all ears. Hopefully this will give you a good guidance, but at the same time, I would love to hear what you guys have in place at the moment and see if we can put together something that's valuable for everyone. Thank you. So with humans, we always have a manager to make sure that we are being productive in what we do. And I think with robots, it's kind of the same principle. We need to make sure that robots are being productive as we design, and over time, application changes or process changes, or we can find ways to optimize a robot. So you always need someone to kind of look after the solution in production. And do you guys agree with that or disagree?
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
It needs to be fed, watered and looked after. They can't be high maintenance in production.
Yeah, and I've seen in the past where guys have forgotten to think about support maintenance when they're building their solution, and it's really when they get to the last stage when they come to deployment, it's like, all right, who's going to look after the solution when it's live? They expect the developers will be looking after the solution, but it's not always the case. The business will have a plan or a pipeline or process that they want to automate. Then you don't want your high value resources to focus on support maintenance. You want them to keep innovating and keep building the solutions so the business see a high ROI on these processes that are in the pipeline.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So I think some of the things that we're kind of going to consider in support maintenance. So we talk about support maintenance, and I'll go into this a little more deeper in a minute. But there's monitoring your robots in production, and there is always going to be ad hoc work or change requests from business. Maybe it's to enhance the robot, or maybe it's to apply some changes to the business logic. So we always got to consider support, maintenance, and those bits as well. So now with support, robots run 24/7, and with processes, with automated processes, you may have some processes that run during the day, you may have some processes run during overnight, or some that run 24/7. So I think when you're building out your support function, you got to take this into consideration, whether if the robot's running at night, would you need support at night, or would you need to have a support team active at night to make sure if the robot fails that they can resolve the issues, or can they wait till the morning? So I think that's one of the things you guys got to take into consideration. And even with tools, do you guys attach to your current IT support ticketing system or the current framework? And SLAs. So with the SLAs, especially for RPA, they could be same as your business IT SLAs, or they could be separate to the whole IT function. And I'm curious to hear, how have you seen in the past or currently, how do you see the support team for automation working? Do you see it as part of the IT team, or do you see it as a separate team on its own?
I would say a separate team for myself. The IT team we have in Dorset CCG are only really kitted out to look after office hours, about 400 staff or whatever. And most of them don't actually want to look after an RPA solution. They see it as being just a nuisance that's added onto their infrastructure. That's why I went for the cloud option and put Blue Prism Cloud in, because I knew I could then rely on Blue Prism's 24/7 support, and then my team would then do the sort of fielding of jobs at a lower level, as it were. And as we're doing things like patient referrals, they are 24/7. So if something breaks and the processes don't get automated in the middle of the night, we need to know about it as well.
Perfect.
A team between 10 and 12 people working on shifts looking after robots 4 or 5 years ago. but ended up building a robot. All the robots on the platform all did handshakes and did all this and reduced that 12 people down to one person half a day a week. He would raise tickets, reboot machines and everything.
That's really good.
The other bit is, we're working with a number of NHS organisations at the moment. I've been primarily working with NHS for the last 3 years. And the reality is they don't always have enough people to separate development and ops. It tends to be a case of 2 or 3 people are being trained up, and we're working with organisations at the moment who are training a few people up, and they have to develop the processes and then go into maintenance mode on the processes at exactly the time that the business and the organisation is coming to them saying, we've got all these processes because we've heard about this wonderful thing.
Yeah, I've seen that happen a lot of time in the past, and I've seen sometimes the developers they don't stick around long. So when they're forced because they're pure developers or they want to keep on developing and they're forced to do support maintenance, they find that it's not as exciting as developing on a new project, and that's why they tend to leave the business, or they move on, or try and find new opportunities that focuses on development, or or climb up into a solution architect role. I don't know if you guys see the kind of same things. It may be an early stage where you guys go.
I think you might be giving Chris ideas, actually.
I heard somebody I think it was yesterday, was saying that as soon as you get a developer deploying a live automation, they now become 20% more marketable. So they tend to disappear because they've got proof of doing it.
Then you get the 2 years experience, it goes up again, and then they get handed.
Exactly.
That's from the pitfalls of training them up.
Yep.
If you don't train them and they stay, that's another problem.
Exactly.
There's problems all around. Perfect. So, and I think on the next couple of slides, I'm just going to kind of whiz through them. I'm not going to explain, what maintenance is. I'm sure all of you are aware of what maintenance is. But it's just to make sure that processes, there is some sort of maintenance plan to ensure that they're always continuous operational. But I think there should be some time set aside to find ways to kind of enhance that process. From when you deploy the process from the beginning, you might have exhausted probably all the opportunities, but there's always ways to find a way to optimize the process. Especially when application changes, there's new features available, and things change. So there's always a way to streamline the process. And I think the key factor is to find ways to optimize the process. So maybe you could run another process on the same virtual machine, and it's trying to find that balance where you have found a way to optimize the whole process to the max that you can. And then you can fit on as many other processes on the same virtual machine as possible. But at the same time, you should be working with IT team, with applications team to identify the roadmap for application changes, so that you can pre-plan and be proactive rather than reactive in these changes. And I think a lot of people, what I've seen in the past, where once they deploy the process, it's kind of forgotten about. It's working, it's in production, and then when there's a change to the application, there's a breakage in communication because they didn't know there was an update on the application, or they didn't know that the application update would impact the robot. So I think that's one kind of key lesson to take away, is that you should always be in contact with the IT team to make sure that you've got a clear view of the roadmap of the applications that are involved in your processes. And then if there are going to be changes that impact your process, then you be proactive on those changes.
Has anyone had any problems when the clocks go forward or backwards with the processes?
I have in the past, especially with the server, with the servers not being updated, or the environments not being updated, or sometimes we've had where the application best applications had to have the time manually adjusted, and that sometimes has caused the robot to run an hour later or than usual, or an hour earlier. And if it's run an hour earlier, it says, "Oh, the input files are here. I can't do the robot," and then it doesn't do the work the whole night. And I think that's been a major learning curve for most organizations, that to make sure that the times sync. And I think when I was working at Next, some of the applications that they use, there was, this was on New Year's Day, I was called in to make a fix because the time changed, but the application times didn't change. And that literally just the robot didn't run. But I think that was a good learning curve for us then. And that's something to consider, especially with clock changes and new dates, or New Year, sorry.
We had our analytics dashboard break when the clocks changed, because the thing had been coded. I'd actually written this dashboard. It had been coded so that it would calculate the time submitted and the time completed, and it was then showing that they took more than a year because it was assuming they got processed the next year. And also the problem is we had a night shift. We had a night shift in the operations in the bank of about 400 night shift staff who were using the robots. And so we had a night shift support team, all working 12-hour shifts. So it had also messed up the shift timings, because you were contracted to work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and then the clocks changed and you had another hour.
I just mentioned it because we got a clock change coming up for all you newbies. So look out for that coming in on a Monday morning when the clocks have changed. When I surprise you robots.
We tell up, and there's no being about robots. They walk on rogue. The final point around service, sorry, not final point, the second last point, is around monitoring. With some certain processes, you might need active monitoring, and this is around people monitoring robots. But you got to think about active monitoring. So one good example to give you here is that a retail company, they've got, they supply credit accounts to their customers, and they're open to fraud at all times. So they have a fraud prevention process that runs every hour. It looks for certain activities that happen on the website, and it highlights those cases to the fraud prevention team to say that they've tracked this certain activity. Maybe the person opened a credit account, added in 10 design items, or went to ship checkout and put it as a different address. So those kind of activities run every hour, and if that process stops, then they're losing the time to close these potential fraud accounts down. And with this retail business, if they don't stop the order within the hour, it's too late to kill the order. So sometimes you need monitoring. So if processes fail, then someone can act on it quite quickly. So I don't know, especially in the NHS, there may be some critical processes that need to run on the hour, and if they fail, they need to have plan B in place to ensure that you get the same data that you need within the hour, or otherwise it may be too late to stop something.
Definitely. Lots and lots of occasions. I think, the COVID antibody testing that we've been doing has to be processed at 6 in the morning. And by 6:05, I'll have an email from the people who wanted the results saying, we haven't seen the stats for today, what happened? I've had it fail 3 times, once on holiday, but it's all fixed now.
So when you failed, how did you overcome? So how did you resolve it, or what happened when you failed?
Actually, it was there's a problem which they've actually solved today. It was something to do with one of the IADO engines wasn't working properly, and it was having a CPU issue, so it wasn't managing the queue for the Blue Prism bot, and it just stopped and just ignored processes going through. The first time it happened, it was I just got the message come through, restarted the job. Second time, I was got it to monitor to see if I got an email. If I didn't get an email by 6:05, I got another notification. So yeah, it's as you go on with these things, you develop a solution, and you keep on adapting it over and over again. You add more features to it, and yeah, the dream is to have a bot that's managing the bots, and that'll be superb, and fixing the problems as well.
And fixing problems, yeah.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you learn from maybe the first time when something goes wrong, and the information could be critical, and then you kind of put a plan B in place for everything. Say something does go wrong, or you didn't receive the information by a certain time, then you also got to think about how you can pull that information out quickly, especially if something like that is critical. But I think with monitoring, setting up alerts, whether like yourselves, setting alerts, so if something doesn't come through, then it should be flagged up, and that always helps, whether it's an IT team or the business, to say that this file's not come in, it should have come in by now, so someone can investigate what's gone wrong, and narrow down the time where people are waiting around for information. You're already working on to find out and investigating what's gone wrong, and finding a solution to provide that information to them.
Yeah, well, I used to get that the bot would then go into ServiceNow, create a ticket, the name of the process, the last 10 logs, so all the information is ready then for the developer, so they can see. And the way that the framework that I build in, it tells you exactly what you're doing at that time. So you were clicking on this, or you were reading that, so it tells you exactly where it's fallen over. So it's all there for the guys. That's why I got it down from 12 to half a person.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. As with error handling and the messages that you output from the robots is quite key. You just don't want a squirrel message that no one probably can understand what's gone wrong. I think it's information around whereabouts it's gone wrong in the process, what page, any little thing that can help and help you investigate the issue quite quickly. That's all beneficial. So I've seen in the past, where clients have just written the robot failed at on screen 2, for example, and it's like, yeah, but where did it fail, or what stage did it fail? So I think all that information really helps to narrow down where it's kind of fallen over, and wasting time looking at that whole screen 2 and going back on logs and seeing, you did this and that, and this is why it failed. So as much as the information you can put in an error message, it's more beneficial for just for you guys, for the support team as well, to resolve the issue.
I think the operations who are looking after this may not necessarily be looking at it from an IT lens. So an error coming up, which is a .NET error, doesn't make any sense at all to the operators looking after it. But if you had failed to click submit, then you know exactly what that means, and they match out the screenshot that goes in with the ticket. Yeah.
Yes. Oh yes. Screenshots is vital for any error management. And it's surprising. I think I'm not talking about recent. I think it's probably 6-7 years ago. No one used to include screenshots, especially on Groupism. Groupism posts that I used to look at. No one used to include screenshots. You get an error message, but you never see screenshots. And I think in part of Europe is a part of the framework that actually includes screenshots. As part of error management.
We actually had a robot for that. We had a bot set up so that if somebody sent an email to the support mailbox that didn't have a screenshot and didn't use the correct template, then it would send it back to them and say that your ticket's been closed for incorrect information. Please resubmit it as a screenshot.
Amazing.
That's messy robotics, that.
Don't send me an email about the office. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I will be deleting any email you send before then.
Well, you see, I used to work day shift, and I used to be the sort of escalated support, not so much for the RPA, but for databases and a whole bunch of sort of Windows Forms applications. And every morning I used to come into 3 or 4 messages from night shift, most of which were not really technical errors. They were just people mistaking things that they hadn't understood or they hadn't done correctly. And it was just literally impossible when you had such vague information, no screenshots, no detail of what's gone wrong. And so that's why we put the bot on it to just reject these, so that if night shift had a real problem, then they'd at least send the correct information before they left and day shift came in. Otherwise, we'd bounce emails back for a week.
Amazing. Perfect. So over to ad hoc changes. So with any automation, there's always going to be changes and enhancements going forward. Once you develop a solution, it's not saying this is going to be permanent. Application always changes, process always changes as well. So when you're building out, or when you're starting with the automation journey, you should always think about the change management. How would that take place? Who should be the approvers? What stages it should go through? Sometimes you could get the support team or your new automation support team to make these small changes so that your developers keep focusing on big projects. So I think is how you identify and split this responsibility between the development team and the support team. I've seen in the past where the development makes the changes, the development team makes the changes, and the support team makes changes. So I think you just got to identify where you draw the line on the changes. If it's a minor change, there's still the support team, and if it's a big change, does that go back to the developers to make the change? So these are some things that you can kind of estimate also to understand how big the change is and the protocols the process that the business should follow. And with these changes, you can have priorities on these changes, P1, P2, and P3. And usually P2, P3 get added to a backlog where P1, if it's something urgent, is usually because they've forgotten the application being changed tomorrow or is being updated tomorrow and they've located for it. So with change requests and change management, how have you guys seen the process take place? Is it following with the rest of the business on any type of changes, or with automation has it been a separate change management process for it?
You start getting metrics from the robot from day one to so you see the cases failing on, and you can quickly put a pivot table together to show system exceptions, types, counts, and percentage, and then you can add those into a backlog to improve your robot, so you get the system exceptions down. Other change requests when a customer wants to open up a new avenue or a new line of business into a process. Request, and that has to be formally requested because you have to look at the process that's in place and look at the solution to expand upon it. And again, back to the framework, if it's an object that's fallen over, that's generally because a selector or an attribute has changed on the screen, and I let the first team update an object, but when it gets into a component, which is the next level up, that's when it goes back to a developer. We wouldn't let junior people mess with the components. There's a logic involved.
Yeah, agreed. So I think with any small changes the support team can manage. Maybe the buttons moved or selectors changed, as you mentioned. But if it's a whole new process logic or change to the process logic, that typically gets handed back to the developer. But in some instances, I've seen that the support team can cater for those changes as well. It just depends on how experienced they are in that particular RPA tool, and if that's their primary focus to support the automation, then so they make these changes as well. But for that to happen, there needs to be sufficient amount of handover and responsibilities, responsibilities to be handed over to the support team. And I think I'll speak about this a little bit down the line. So with it, we kind of mentioned incidents, events, and requests. So I think there are different priorities in this. Where P1 and P2 is an incident, where P3 is most likely to be a request. And what you need to identify, what would you class as P1 and what would you class as P2. So what we've always said, a P1 is always, if the process has completely stopped working, and it's a critical process, and it's not working, or it could be any process. But if it's not run from beginning, it should be classed as P1. Or P2 is when the process is running, but part of the process is is broken, but it can do. So you can do some, maybe you can do some business scenarios, but the rest of the scenarios is broken, maybe because of changes. That would be class P2, and then P3 will be any sort of request to make minor enhancements to the process. But I think we're here, and I think this screen here would explain is that what the role of the automation team is if a P1 or P2 incident happens. And P3, where P1, P2, they should evaluate what's gone wrong, make an action plan, resolve the issue, and then do a kind of post-analysis to see why it went wrong in the first place, and do a lessons learned, and maybe feed that back to the developers or the team to say, we found what the issue was. This is how we resolved it, and that vital information going back to the developers could be useful, so that this same issue could not, the same issue doesn't happen again. So I think that's one thing to kind of consider. And then I'm going to kind of go into DevOps approach a little bit down the line. That would be useful for you guys to make sure that the development team and the support team are in constant communication. So when the guys are developing, you're not making the same mistakes that you might have made at the start. Now with the support, there are, I'll class three tiers, three different levels. You could have multiple layers or even shorter layers, and some people use the term SREs as well, where they cater for all types of issues. So now with support, if it's a level 1 issue, and what I mean by level 1 is, if a file's missing or the input file is incorrect, and those kind of things, that should sit with the business, and the business should resolve that issue. Where level 2 is something going wrong with the solution, and that should sit with the support team. It requires someone with the knowledge of the RPA tool itself. It is something that can be done by maybe the process owner or the process manager. And thirdly, it should be, if a solution is something wrong with the RPA tool itself or the applications, then that communication that will sit with either the IT team or the RPA vendor. So these are the main kind of 3 areas I've highlighted. I don't know if you guys have seen any other or have seen a different approach to this.
I was just going to say a quick comment, but yeah, it's back to the point earlier. Some organisations have got a small support team or capability, and don't have the ability to add additional resources to do that. So yeah, the developer's wearing multiple hats, or 2 or 3 developers are wearing multiple hats. So it doesn't necessarily allow them to have that escalation capability. But yeah, it certainly makes sense from a good practice, ideal setup.
Yeah. Sorry, Karen.
So what we usually had is we probably had the lead developer as the level 3. So instead of ordinary developers finding themselves getting involved in support issues, anything that support couldn't handle would go to the lead developer tech lead, Simon, and if necessary, he'd put a developer on it. We never actually escalated things to IT about robotics itself or the RPA. Often we'd find that what needed to be fixed was an IT dependency. Most of our RPA solutions were hitting internal databases and internal platforms. We had a big web-based Oracle system. And if the problem was with that, then it would get escalated to IT, but we'd never ask IT to get involved with one of our RPA solutions. For a start, I don't think anyone there had the skill set to be doing it. I think that the team we had were the only people who would have known how to do it.
Yeah, no, of course. And so what I meant by these 3 different tiers was that, so the level 1 is issues with the file missing, like I mentioned. The second level would be issues with the automation solution itself, so that would sit with the automation support team. Yeah. But the third level would be if it's this, for example, the process was using SAP and SAP is not loading or is crashed, and we can log to SAP. So that would go to the IT support team because it's an application issue and not a solution issue. Or with some tools, like with RPA tools, there may be an issue with the RPA tool itself. And I'm trying to think of an example, but it's been a little while since we've seen one that's an issue with the RPA tool. Or we've had in the past where we've contacted Blue Prism because it was an issue with the actual tool and not the solution. So they've got involved and they said they'll give us a patch on that issue. But I think it's very rarely you get to level 3. The only time you get to level 3 would be with the IT team if an application has broken down or there's an issue with one of the softwares that the robot is utilizing.
You had a good example from Paul a little earlier where the IADA engine in Blue Prism Cloud caused an issue with the automation.
Of course, you can't log in as a
filling
user.
up.
Sorry?
If you're monitoring that, if anyone had that, too many logs, blowing up your platform.
No, exactly. And I haven't got access to log into that virtual machine either, so never mind.
I'm not going to touch much on this, but performance dashboard report. I presume everyone would have some sort of performance dashboard or report on the webwork. And I think the main three areas that the report should highlight is the availability, the uptime of the webwork, the service, the number of incidents, or how long it took to resolve the issues, and the efficiency. Now, with these reports, it's quite useful to understand maybe if there's you can go back on a couple of months' reports and see a trend, whether a particular virtual worker is breaking out on a regular basis, or if there's issues with specific processes, and this can give you a lot of information on the trends of what's been happening. Because most of the time the IT support team will keep resolving, the automation support team will keep resolving these issues. But if you don't get visible data from them, see what went wrong and see how you can prevent those mistakes again, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. So having some sort of report from them would help you to make sure that your solutions and your environment are strong, and you're kind of preventing anything to go wrong in the long run. Any questions on this slide, or anyone have any views on performance dashboards and reports? No? Perfect. Okay, so what I want to kind of cover here is when you should start thinking about support maintenance. So a lot of times people start thinking of support maintenance when they get to the deployment stage. But for what I feel is that they should start during the process discovery stage. When you're building the business case, you should think about including the costs of support maintenance into your business case. And the reason why I say this, you're saying that you see ROI maybe in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, but you just factor in the development costs and the license fees, etc. But I think support maintenance plays a kind of key role in that business case as well. You're still going to have effort from support maintenance team, or pay support maintenance team internally to support your solution in production. So that conversation of support maintenance should start from then, and you should start thinking about what kind of services you would need for this, whether it's support, maintenance, maybe it's monitoring. And, for small organizations, you might not have a separate team. For large organizations, you probably have a separate team. So it's involving this, the service manager or from the automation team at this stage. And then, during testing, you should start knowledge sharing the solution, passing the PDD, the solution design document, and those kind of things over, and ensuring that they're ready to support you as soon as you go into deployment. And I think having them involved from that beginning, it gives them a clear picture. They know exactly what they're going to be supporting, and it's nothing new to them. Sometimes I've seen where the support teams have been put into the loop. They get to deployment stage, and then the support team prevents the solution going live because they're not being in a loop. They don't understand what they're going to be supporting, or what the solution looks like, or anything like that as well. So that's why it's key to get them involved at the beginning of the phase rather than at the end of the phase. And maybe, Paul, is this something that you see for the NHS, that you guys loop them in from the beginning, or when do you guys loop your support team in?
Well, we're all together doing all of the support, so we're involved at every step, which is it is quite good. So when you're doing the process design and discovery, then you're knowing what sort of problems, you're sort of talking to people, and they can tell you what problems they are likely to get with their current system, and then you can sort of preempt or at least recognise how to escalate back to members of staff if there are other issues. So it's, but we're still very small and starting off on that. Later on, it's worth bearing that in mind that you know, we should be looking at building stuff in at the sort of process design level to cope with these sort of issues. And if you've got bots that are automatic gathering logs and stuff like that, that's where you're going to have to design it. So
yeah. And I think my next slide kind of covers you know, what kind of things that you should have in place. And then I know, you know, everyone does things differently, but you know, especially, you know, for some of the clients that I've worked with in the past and the companies I've worked with in the past, we've always run some sort of service kickoff meeting at the beginning of process discovery. We agree what kind of support we will need, whether it's just, you know, automation as well as infrastructure, IT. So you're not just looping in the automation support team, you're also looping in the IT team as well. And sometimes they can flag up issues. I think one thing to highlight here was where we had an issue where we were using a particular CRM application, but when we said we're going to be running automation on it, they said that the environment won't be able to handle it. So we were able to rectify the issue right here, rather than we put it live and everything went bust. So it's good to loop in the IT team and this automation support team at the beginning and discuss the requirements and what you're planning to do.
It's worth mentioning changes when you're going through the different environments as well. Everyone says test is the same as staging, staging is the same as production, but very rarely they're the same. There's always some tweaks.
There's always differences, even with applications and environments. I think I've probably seen it twice where they've been the same, but most of the time there are some minor differences, and that always impacts the timeline for one and the solution. So when you migrate into different environments, you're always constantly tweaking for it to work on that particular environment. And when you go to delivery, it's always good to start doing small testing and not just put the solution live. You know, do small tests, validate the results, make sure you're happy, then ramp it up slowly. So have a deployment plan, and not just do a full-blown deployment and hope for the best that it works. Is to ramp it up slowly until you're confident and the business is confident that it's working in production, and you know, they're signed off every day to say that they validated the results or the outputs of the robot.
So you want to include a warranty period. So you say you want it to run for 14 days without incident, or you want it to run 100 cases without falling over, or whatever you set, stipulate in your warranty there to help the operations and smoother handover for them.
Yeah, so you know, sometimes people had, you know, 5 days hypercare, 10 days hypercare. It just depends on, you know, the size of the processes. But you know, if you've got your own internal automation team, or maybe sometimes it's the developers themselves. Generally, the developers will do the hypercare and then pass it over to the support team, which is always, you know, easier because they've got the knowledge around the process, and it's easy for them to resolve the issues. Once it's got to that stable state, or then hand it over to the automation support team. So I think in here there are some documentations that, you know, you could think about, you know, having automation readiness sign off from the support team, you know, ensuring that you've got requests for change documents in place, service definition documents, and service definition documents may not be, you know, an option for every organization. It may be for a large organization where they've got different divisions and different branches, and to have a clear expectation around SLAs, you know, communicated all the way down to the business SMEs as well. You know, they can't expect that if an issue arises that it will resolve straight away or within the hour. So it's having that communication from the business SMEs all the way to the IT support team, so that everyone's in the same group. So what I'm going to show you here, it's a support structure, and as I mentioned, you know, it's probably not probably feasible for a smaller organization, but in the ideal world, you know, you would have 4 pockets in the support team, or in playing a support role. So starting with automation support, you know, their role is to resolve the issues that happen with the robots in production, whether it's an incident or manual changes, small changes, I should mention here, and making sure that these robots are always available and operational. Where the developers, although they're not in the support team, they make the updates to the bot configuration, and I think Gavin mentioned earlier, where the automation support team can make smaller changes to the objects, where the two components and to the actual process itself. It will be the developers, and if they've got any downtime, they can support the support team as well. And the service management, their role is to be part of the whole journey from the beginning to the end, ensuring that you've got the support that you need from the beginning, in terms of support, what's required from support, and managing the overall service provided back to the business. They could be in charge of coordinating releases, changes, and InfoSec approvals, and those kind of areas. But they will be solely responsible for the support team and helping the business get to the end goal, and ensuring that their robots are always operational. And the other part is IT and business support. Now, although they're not part of the automation support team, you need to have you need to have communication in place with them, so that if something goes wrong with the applications, you're in contact with them, or they can tell you if something's been changed to the applications or there's an update, so they come back to you and let you guys know. But at the same time, it's the whole team kind of working together to ensure not just the robot and applications, so the robot is always operational, and the IT support team working on the application is also operational. But anything that's changing or there's going to be changes from either side, you notify each other, so there's no P1s or priority 1 incidents that happen just because of a small change that either the automation team made or the business team made. Any questions on this slide? Okay. So what I want to share here, it's a high-level kind of support overview. And we'll start with the automated process. And now, not everyone will have it on the cloud. As well as use Azure as an example. But if there's an incident or alert or a change, you'll usually go to the support team. The support team would be responsible for these incidents or alerts and change. And they can feedback, if it's a change, if it's a major change, they can feedback to the automation development team, and the service management team is also in the loop of all of these things that are happening here. But where if it's a business exception or exception error handling, you kind of go back, you can loop into business operations as well. So as I mentioned earlier, where files are missing or data is incorrect, that will go back to the business for them to kind of resolve. And if it's a non-automation problem, and which is the IT problem or application problem, you will loop in the business IT support. But they all kind of, this slide here shows you how everything kind of ties into one big picture, and how things should, how everyone should kind of communicate around the automated process. So if things go wrong, you've got the right level of resources supporting those changes or issues, but everyone's working together to making sure that everything's operational at all times. Anyone want to mention anything on this slide? Okay. So this is one area that I kind of mentioned earlier. I was around the DevOps approach, and it's having that continuous feedback and loop between the development team and operations. And this is between the support team and operations. So when you're constantly developing and making changes, and the developers are handing this over to the support team, having that feedback loop is always valuable, so that you don't make the same mistakes again. You're learning from what went wrong, it helps you decrease the exception rates and reduce the support activities as well. So I know you don't want to have a big support team just because you're pumping out solutions that break over time. Is finding out what things are making the solution break and narrowing down and slimming down the size of the support team. This also helps you, improve development standards, making sure that your robots are also operational. So having that feedback loop is I think quite key, and it's something that everyone, regardless of size of the organization, should implement. I think that's it from me. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to discuss? Perfect. I think we've got 4 minutes left. So over to you, Sarah.
I have a question actually, because you're talking about supervisor bots, but looking at those charts or the form that you just had on the screen, where would the supervisor bot sit before it goes into any other teams?
So sorry, what do you mean by a supervisor bot?
So Gavin, about the bots, managing the bots,
yes,
before it then goes into support. Where does that sit, and at what point can you use those two?
So I think you can still have the feedback loops with the supervisor bots, and as the supervisor bot, say repairing the bots that are broken, you can still generate reports to say how the robot fixed that particular robot, and you can produce that report at the end of the month and still give that back to the developers and say, these are the issues that went wrong on these particular processes or these robots, and this is how they were fixed. And that could be a valuable information for the developers to prevent that mistake from happening again.
The supervisor bot he or she is just first line support. So if you, like I had 12 people sitting there watching robots for different companies all running, did it load at this time, did they run a report at this time, and they had checklists to go through. It was a nightmare. So, and then if someone did fall over, all they would do was go on the bot, taking the logs off, and then raising a ticket. So it just cuts those out. The guys haven't got to sit there and watch to make sure things are running at certain times, because the supervisor bot schedules all the processes in. So the next virtual machine in the farm picks up the next process, runs it. If it fails, another process detects that and raises a ticket, one of the other virtual workers. So it does away with first line support.
Got ya. Thanks. Has anyone got anything to add before we wrap up?
No, I was just going to say I love the way that Gavin's put in gender for the robots. I've done exactly the same as well. I've got both he's and she's.
Nice to name them.
Exactly.
Fab. Well, thanks for that, Bhavik. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I hope to see you all in 2 weeks for the next one.
Lovely.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks, President. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.